During the Siege of Leningrad from 1941 to 1944, Soviet factories continued producing T-34 tanks under horrific conditions. Workers labored while starving and freezing, often sleeping beside machines. The continued output became a symbol of Soviet endurance. September 8, 1941. Leningrad, Soviet Union. A low, distant rumble moves across the Neva River like an approaching storm. It is not thunder. It is artillery. Inside the Kirov factory, senior engineer Ivan Mihailovich Zorin pauses with his gloved hand resting on cold steel. The floor beneath his boots vibrates faintly. Then again, closer this time. Dust drifts down from overhead beams and settles on unfinished armor plates stacked like gravestones along the assembly hall. Someone mutters a curse. No one stops working. Outside the factory walls, the last railway line into Leningrad has just been severed. The siege has begun. Zorin glances at the clock bolted high on the wall above the milling machines. The hands tremble with each impact, but they keep moving. It is just past noon. He has been awake for nearly 30 hours. Around him, men and women, many barely trained, lean into their machines with the grim focus of people who understand, without saying it aloud, that this city is now on its own. The German Army Group North has completed the encirclement. Hitler's order is clear. Leningrad is not to be stormed. It is to be starved into submission. Inside the Kirov factory, the workers do not yet know how long the siege will last. They do not know that winter temperatures will soon drop to 40 below zero, or that bread rations will shrink to less than a slice per day. They only know that orders from Moscow remain unchanged. Production must continue. The Kirov factory is no ordinary plant. Before the war, it was one of the Soviet Union's premier heavy industrial complexes, sprawling across the southern districts of the city. It has produced tractors, turbines, and artillery. Now, under emergency conversion orders issued in the frantic weeks after the German invasion in June, it has been tasked with something far more urgent. Tanks. Specifically, the KV-1 heavy tank, a massive steel beast weighing over 45 tons, armed with a 76mm gun, and protected by armor thick enough to shrug off most German anti-tank weapons in 1941. T-34s are being built elsewhere, but here, in Leningrad, the KV series is the city's armored lifeline. Each tank requires thousands of components. Steel must be cut, forged, machined, welded, engines assembled, turrets cast and fitted. Every step depends on electricity, tools, and, most critically, people strong enough to work. The siege threatens all of it. As the afternoon wears on, the bombardment intensifies. German artillery batteries positioned south of the city range in on industrial targets. The factory's windows shatter one by one, replaced hastily with plywood and tar paper. Air raid sirens wail, then fall silent. Not because the danger has passed, but because the city has learned that sirens do not stop bombs. Zorin walks the length of the assembly line, shouting over the noise of machinery. "Keep the tolerances tight," he tells a young woman operating a lathe, her cheeks hollow already from weeks of reduced rations. "If the turret ring binds, the crew dies." She nods without looking up. Her hands shake slightly as she feeds the steel into the cutting head. She is 19. 2 months ago, she was a student. By evening, word spreads quietly through the factory. The food warehouses at Bediv have been hit. Burning sugar pours into the streets like black snow. The city's emergency reserves, already inadequate, are gone. No announcement is made over loudspeakers. No speech interrupts the shift. The machines keep running. At midnight, Zorin climbs the stairs to a small office overlooking the main hall. He removes his gloves and flexes his fingers, numb despite the layers of cloth. There is no heat. The boilers were shut down hours ago to conserve fuel. He pulls his coat tighter and studies the production board nailed to the wall. 2 tanks completed today. 1 damaged by shelling before it left the gate. 1 more scheduled for dawn. Outside, tracer rounds stitch the sky. Somewhere beyond the factory walls, civilians are beginning to understand what encirclement truly means. Trams have stopped. Bread lines stretch for blocks. The Neva already carries chunks of early ice. Zorin knows the truth. though he will not say it aloud. The city is being strangled. And yet, in the echoing halls of the Kirov factory, steel continues to take shape. Men sleep beside their machines, curled up on oily rags. Women trade shifts without going home, because home is cold and dark and empty. A tank hull moves slowly down the line, pushed by hand when the conveyor fails. Its armor is still warm from welding. Someone chalks a name on its side before the paint dries. For Leningrad, the siege has sealed the city shut. But inside this factory, surrender is not part of the design. November 20th, 1941. Kirov Factory, southern Leningrad. The cold arrives quietly at first, seeping in through shattered windows and cracked walls, settling into the bones of the factory like an infection. By late November, it is no longer possible to ignore. The mercury drops past 0, then past 10, then past 20 below. Oil thickens in its containers. Steel bites bare skin like a living thing. Inside workshop number 3, Anna Petrovna Sokolova presses her foot down on the lathe pedal and feels nothing happen. The machine does not respond. She leans closer, breath fogging the air, and touches the casing. It is colder than the outside snow. The lubricant has frozen solid. Heat it. Someone calls weakly from the next station. There is no heat. Anna straightens slowly, dizziness washing over her as if the floor has tilted. She has eaten 250 grams of bread today. The bread is not bread, not really. Mostly sawdust and ground cellulose, dark and heavy, issued in a ration line that began forming before dawn and still has not ended by midday. She rubs her hands together, then slaps them against her coat, trying to coax life back into her fingers. Around her, the workshop is quieter than it should be. Several machines stand idle, abandoned not from lack of orders, but lack of bodies. Deaths are no longer announced. At the far end of the hall, engineer Zorin watches as a group of workers attempt to move a turret casting into position. The overhead crane has failed again. Electricity is rationed now, coming on in unpredictable bursts when the city grid can spare it. When the power is out, production does not stop. They push. 5 people strain against the steel, boots slipping on frost-coated concrete. One man collapses to his knees, gasping, his face gray. No one scolds him. No one can afford to. Rest 10 seconds, Zorin says. His voice sounds strange in his own ears, thin, brittle. Then again. They try again. Beyond the factory gates, Leningrad is dying. Streetcars lie frozen in place, half buried by snow. Horses collapse where they stand and are stripped of flesh within hours. Entire families vanish behind apartment doors that never open again. The sound of artillery has become constant, a dull percussion marking time like a broken metronome. And still, the Kirov factory produces tanks. By December, the official death toll from starvation reaches thousands per day. Workers arrive late not because they are lazy, but because they have stopped along the way to sit down and cannot always stand back up. Some never make it to the gate. Inside the factory, a new rule is posted without ceremony. No one goes home during a shift unless ordered. Not because management is cruel, but because the walk home kills more people than the machines ever will. People sleep where they fall. Anna curls up beside her lathe during a power outage, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. The floor vibrates faintly as artillery lands somewhere nearby. She dreams of soup. She dreams of summer. She dreams of a city that still breathes. She wakes to shouting. Power! Power! The lights flicker on, dim and yellow. Motors groan awake like wounded animals. Anna pulls herself upright, her limbs heavy as stone, and resumes her position without speaking. The lathe begins to turn, slow at first, then steadier. Metal shavings curl away, glowing faintly before cooling instantly in the frozen air. Across the hall, Zorin confers with a Red Army liaison officer, Captain Sergei Volkov, his uniform hanging loose on his frame. Moscow wants numbers, Volkov says, his breath puffing white. Front commanders are screaming for armor. Zorin gestures toward the hall. This is what we can give. Volkov nods. He has seen the city. He understands what those numbers cost. In January 1942, The cold reaches its peak. -40 degrees. Water freezes inside pipes. Ink freezes in pens. Blood freezes on the snow before it can soak in. The factory adapts the only way it can, by brute will. Workers rotate constantly to keep circulation going. Fires are lit in metal drums using broken furniture. Precision tolerances are maintained by touch when instruments fail. Tanks are assembled incomplete if necessary, then finished outdoors near the front lines. 1KV-1 rolls directly out of the factory gate and into combat. Its paint still wet, crewed by men who helped build it hours earlier. German artillery zeroes in on the plant. Shells tear through roofs. Entire sections collapse. Production shifts to whatever buildings remain standing. When one workshop is destroyed, the line simply bends around the rubble. Anna watches as a tank hull disappears through the gate, tracks clanking, exhaust steaming in the frozen air. She feels no pride. Pride requires energy. She feels only a quiet, stubborn refusal to stop. Leningrad is starving. The factory is freezing. And yet, the machines continue to move. March 18, 1942. Kirov Factory District, Leningrad. Dawn arrives as a thin gray suggestion rather than light. Smoke hangs over the southern districts, drifting low and heavy, trapped by the cold air. The ground shakes. Not with the distant thunder of artillery this time, but with something closer, sharper. German shells are walking in. Inside the factory compound, the first impact slams into Building 5, ripping open the roof like paper. Steel fragments scythe through the air, clanging off armor plates stacked in the yard. A second shell follows, then a third, each closer than the last. Engineer Zorin is halfway up a stairwell when the blast throws him against the wall. His helmet, issued months ago, rarely worn indoors, smacks hard against concrete. He tastes blood. Down! Someone screams. They do not go down. They scatter. The Kirov factory has been under bombardment for months, but this is different. The fire is deliberate, systematic. German forward observers have finally identified the plant as a priority target. Their maps now show what the workers have always known. This factory is a weapon. Outside, anti-aircraft guns bark at a lone German reconnaissance plane circling high above the city. Its engine note is faint but unmistakable. Where it flies, artillery follows. Zorin forces himself upright and runs toward workshop number 2, boots slipping on icy steps. Inside, chaos reigns. A welding bay is ablaze, flames licking at scaffolding. The air is thick with smoke and metal dust. Somewhere in the haze, a woman is screaming. "Shut down the power!" Zorin shouts. Before the lines rupture. No one answers. The power has already failed. Through the smoke, he spots Anna Sokolova, dragging a hose toward the fire with 2 others. Her face is blackened with soot, eyes wide but focused. A shell detonates nearby, knocking all 3 flat. They rise again without speaking. By mid-morning, 3 buildings are damaged beyond use. Production has ground to a halt, not because the will to work is gone, but because there is nowhere left to stand. The Red Army liaison, Captain Volkov, arrives breathless, snow clinging to his boots. "Orders from the front," he says. "Move what you can. They're advancing artillery again." Zorin looks at the wreckage around him. "Where?" Volkov spreads his hands. "Anywhere they can't see." So the factory moves underground. Over the next days, machinery is dismantled piece by piece and hauled into basements, tunnels, and half-collapsed storage cellars. Heavy presses are lowered by hand using block and tackle. Electrical lines are rerouted through flooded corridors. Workshops are reassembled in darkness lit by kerosene lamps. It is not efficient. It is not safe. It works. German shells continue to fall, smashing empty buildings and yards that no longer matter. Beneath the rubble, the sound of steel being cut and shaped continues, muffled but relentless. Anna works a new station now, deep underground. The ceiling is so low she cannot fully stand. Condensation drips steadily onto the machine bed, freezing in strange patterns. Her hands are permanently swollen, joints stiff with cold and hunger. She no longer feels fear. Fear requires imagination. In late March, a KV-1 tank emerges from a hidden exit at night, its engine coughing to life in the darkness. The crew mounts up in silence. There is no ceremony, no cheering. The tank lumbers away toward the front line, where German infantry have begun probing the southern defenses, unaware that armor is still being born beneath the city they are trying to kill. German reports from this period express confusion. Reconnaissance photographs show the Kirov factory in ruins. Intercepted radio traffic suggests continued tank deployment from Leningrad sectors. The numbers do not match. Inside the city, the workers pay the price. Starvation deaths peak in February and March. People collapse at their machines and do not get back up. Their co-workers move them gently aside and keep working. Tools are passed to shaking hands without comment. Zorin attends a brief meeting with remaining senior staff in a candlelit room once used for planning conferences. "We cannot maintain this pace," one foreman says quietly. "We are losing too many." Zorin nods. He has lost track of how many faces are missing from the line. "If we slow down," he replies, "the front breaks. If the front breaks, the city dies faster." No one argues. Spring comes slowly, grudgingly. The snow begins to rot rather than melt. Bodies buried shallowly during the winter reappear along the roads. The Neva remains frozen longer than anyone expects. But with the thaw comes something else. Movement. Far across Lake Ladoga, engines rumble. The road of life is stirring. April 4th, 1942. Lake Ladoga, northeast of Leningrad. The ice groans like a living thing. Beneath a gray sky stretched tight with clouds, a line of trucks inches its way across the frozen surface of Lake Ladoga. Their engines snarl and cough in the cold air, exhaust plumes trailing behind them like ghosts. Each driver grips the wheel with white-knuckled intensity, listening not to the wind, but to the ice itself. A crack echoes somewhere below. The convoy does not stop. This is the road of life, the only artery left feeding the besieged city. In winter, it runs across ice. In summer, across open water. And every kilometer is contested by cold, artillery, and German aircraft hunting for movement. In the lead truck, Senior Lieutenant Alexei Morozov leans forward, peering through a windshield clouded with frost. His cargo is not ammunition. It is flour, barely enough to matter. But to the city behind him, it is survival measured in hours. Behind him, other trucks carry something else. Machinery. Back in Leningrad, engineer Zorin stands in a damp underground workshop as a crate is pried open by crowbars. Inside, wrapped in oil-soaked cloth, is a lathe motor salvaged from a factory evacuated months earlier. It is a gift from across the ice. "Careful," Zorin says softly, though his voice carries no strength. "If we break it, we don't get another." The arrival of supplies does not end starvation. Rations remain pitiful. But the road of life changes something fundamental. Hope is no longer theoretical. With limited electricity restored and replacement parts trickling in, the factory begins to stabilize. Production schedules are rewritten. Still brutal, but no longer suicidal. Tanks are assembled more completely before leaving the plant. Engines run smoother. Failures drop. Anna Sokolova survives the winter by accident as much as will. In March, she collapses during a shift and wakes 2 days later in a makeshift infirmary set up inside an administrative office. A nurse gives her hot water with a trace of sugar. "You'll go back," the nurse says without asking. "They need you." Anna nods. She already knows. By late April, German shelling decreases slightly as artillery units redeploy to meet new threats elsewhere along the front. The factory uses the lull to repair what can be repaired. Walls are braced with timber. Camouflage nets are strung over courtyards. Fake debris is arranged to exaggerate damage. Deception becomes a production tool. At the front, Red Army units report something unexpected. German infantry attacks stall when confronted by heavy armor appearing where none should exist. KV tanks roll out of smoke and rubble like phantoms, armor scarred but guns deadly. Captured German soldiers speak of ghost factories beneath the city. Zorin receives a brief note from Moscow in May. Your output exceeds expectations under conditions previously assessed as impossible. Continue. There is no praise. Praise burns calories. The summer of 1942 brings mosquitoes, rot, and exhaustion instead of relief. The ice road disappears, replaced by barges that creep across Ladoga under constant threat of air attack. Supplies improve marginally. Death slows but does not stop. Inside the factory, a new generation of workers arrives. Teenagers, pensioners, women who have never touched industrial machinery before. Training lasts hours, not weeks. Mistakes are corrected on the fly. Anna trains 3 new operators while running her own station. Her voice has grown hoarse. Her face is gaunt. But her hands are steady now, guided by muscle memory forged under fire. One night in July, German bombers slip through the city's defenses and strike the southern districts again. Explosions ripple across the factory grounds. A tank under final assembly is flipped onto its side by the blast. Turret cracked. Zoran climbs onto the wreckage as flames burn nearby. Can it be salvaged? Volkov asks. Zoran studies the damage. The gun, he says, and the engine. They strip the tank where it lies. Parts are hauled away while fires still burn. Nothing is wasted. By August, rumors spread quietly through the city. A counteroffensive is being planned. The factory receives new specifications, minor changes to armor brackets, engine mounts, production tolerances. The front is evolving, and the machines must evolve with it. For the first time since the siege began, the workers sense that what they are building is not merely delaying death, but preparing for something else. Movement. Beyond Leningrad's shattered outskirts, Soviet forces are gathering strength. The city is still starving. The factory is still bleeding people. But across the ice and water of Lake Ladoga, the road of life has done more than deliver food. It has delivered time. January 12, 1943. Southern front of Leningrad. The ground shakes before the dawn breaks. Snow explodes upward in long, dirty plumes as Soviet artillery opens fire along a narrow front south of the city. The sound is continuous, overlapping. A wall of thunder that rolls back across frozen fields and shattered villages. This is not harassment fire. This is preparation. Operation Iskra has begun. Inside a tree line less than 2 kilometers from the front, a KV-1 tank idles, its engine rumbling unevenly in the cold. The smell of fuel and oil fills the cramped interior. The crew sits in silence, breath fogging the air. The tank's commander, Senior Lieutenant Nikolai Besanov, runs a gloved hand across the interior armor plate beside him. The metal is rough, uneven in places. He knows why. This one came from Kirov. The driver mutters, listening to the engine note. Besanov nods. I can tell. He had been there only days earlier, inside the factory grounds, watching workers swarm over the machine while artillery landed in the distance. He remembers a woman with hollow cheeks tightening a bolt with hands that look too thin to hold a wrench. He remembers an engineer shouting measurements while standing ankle-deep in slush. This tank did not roll off a production line. It escaped. At 0930 hours, the order comes. The KV lurches forward, tracks biting into frozen earth. Infantry follows close behind, hunched low, rifles held tight. German machine guns open up almost immediately, tracers slicing through the air. The tank answers with a thunderous crack as its main gun fires, the recoil slamming through the hull. A German anti-tank round strikes the frontal armor and ricochets away with a scream of metal. Inside, no one cheers. They push on. Back in Leningrad, the factory feels the offensive before it hears about it. Artillery fire intensifies across the southern approaches. The air carries a different tone now, not defensive, but advancing. Engineer Zoran stands in the underground workshop as a messenger arrives, snow still clinging to his coat. They've broken through, the man says simply. A narrow corridor, Ladoga to the city. For a moment, no one speaks. Then the machines start again. Operation Iskra does not end the siege, but it cracks it open. A land route, fragile, under fire but real, now links Leningrad to the rest of the Soviet Union. Supplies increase. Evacuations accelerate. The city exhales just slightly. Inside the Kirov factory, production shifts again. With rail access partially restored, some heavy manufacturing is relocated east. But not all. Some lines stay. The tanks are still needed. Anna Sokolova works her station as news filters in piece by piece. Not announcements, just overheard fragments, a shouted comment, a smile that lingers a second longer than usual. She has lost track of time, lost track of seasons. Her world has narrowed to steel, measurements, and survival. But when she hears that Soviet tanks have met German armor head-on south of the city, and held, something inside her tightens. She presses her palm briefly against the tank hull beside her. By mid-1943, the factory's output is a shadow of pre-war numbers. Cannot compete with massive plants beyond the Urals. But that is no longer the point. Every tank built here carries something no other factory can replicate. Carries the siege. German intelligence reports from the summer of 1943 note the continued appearance of heavy armor from Leningrad's sectors despite previous assessments that the city's industrial base had been neutralized. Analysts revised their estimates. The conclusion is uncomfortable. The city is still fighting. Zorin receives a transfer order in August. He is to oversee partial evacuation of remaining equipment to Chelyabinsk. He reads it twice, then folds it carefully. He does not leave immediately. There are still tanks on the line. In January 1944, the guns finally fall silent. After 872 days, the Siege of Leningrad is lifted. The city is unrecognizable. More than 1 million are dead. Streets are lined with mass graves. Buildings stand hollowed and blackened. The population has been reduced by nearly half. Inside the Kirov factory, the machines slow, then stop. Workers stand among them, unsure what to do with stillness. Anna steps outside into the pale winter sun and looks at the gate where so many tanks have passed through. Some straight into battle, some never to return. She does not cry. She has no tears left. Zorin joins her, his coat hanging loose on his frame. "We kept going," she says quietly. "Yes," he replies. "You did." Around them, the city begins the long, painful work of counting its dead and rebuilding its bones. The factory will be repaired. New machines will arrive. New workers will learn their trade. But nothing built here will ever be like those tanks. They were not just weapons. They were proof. Proof that even while starving, freezing, and dying, a city could still fight.